You dirty colored girl. You better stay away from my daughter. Genevieve Lancaster's voice cut through the sweltering afternoon like the crack of a whip. The late summer sun blazed on the brick walkway beside the stone fountain, but the beauty of the scene shattered under her fury. Aaliyah Jackson stood in the garden, gently patting baby Clara's back. The baby had been coughing moments earlier, milk dribbling from her lips, and Aaliyah instinctively held her upright, tapping her back in slow, steady motions. Clara gave a small hiccup of relief, just as Genevieve appeared. "What are you doing to her?" Genevieve shrieked, striding across the lawn, linen caftan billowing, eyes blazing with a strange, desperate intensity. "Give her to me." Before Aaliyah could explain, Genevieve ripped Clara from her arms. The baby let out a terrified wail, tiny fists clenching. "Don't you ever touch my child again." Genevieve's voice was louder now, deliberately carrying toward the open French doors of the house. "I caught you hurting her, trying to make her choke." Aaliyah's eyes widened in shock. "That's not true. She was choking already. I was—" "Lies," Genevieve snapped, stepping closer. "You've been looking for an excuse to get close to her. You think I don't see it? You're here to cause trouble, to take advantage of my family." The words stung. But what made Aaliyah's heart pound wasn't the insult. It was the realization of what this really was. She remembered 2 nights ago, walking through the side hall late in the evening to bring in Clara's bottle, the muffled laughter, the creak of a door, and then Genevieve in a silk slip, wrapped in the arms of Sterling Ashford, Grant's oldest friend. Genevieve's eyes had locked with hers for a split second, panic flashing there before the mask dropped. Now Aaliyah understood. This wasn't about Clara at all. This was about silencing her. "You're lying about me," Aaliyah said quietly, trembling but firm, "because you know I saw." "Shut your mouth!" Genevieve hissed, her face flushing, and with a sudden violent shove, she pushed Aaliyah backward into the stone fountain. The warm, murky water swallowed her, pulling a gasp from her lungs. If you feel for the character in this story, like this video and comment where you are watching from, because maybe someone near you is watching too. "You worthless black parasite," Genevieve shouted, clutching the baby closer. "You're finished here. By tonight you'll be gone, and if you breathe a word of your lies about me, I'll make sure no one hires you again." Aaliyah hauled herself out of the fountain, dripping, shivering. "I've told you I wasn't hurting her," she said weakly. "Save it for someone who cares," Genevieve spat. Heavy footsteps sounded. Grant Lancaster appeared, his eyes scanning the scene. His wife with their crying daughter, Aaliyah soaked and trembling. "What happened?" he demanded. "She was holding Clara and hitting her on the back," Genevieve said quickly. "I caught her hurting our baby." Grant turned to Aaliyah. "Is that true?" "I was helping her breathe." Grant cut her off, stepping forward, gripping a fistful of her wet hair. His voice was low, dangerous. "You work for me. You do not touch what isn't yours. Understand?" "Yes, sir," Aaliyah whispered, her heart pounding with helpless rage. "Go inside and change," he ordered coldly. Aaliyah walked away, humiliation burning hotter than the summer heat. Genevieve's eyes followed her, a faint smile curling at the corner of her lips. Later that evening, in Grant's study, James the butler entered with a tablet in hand. "Sir," he said quietly, "you need to see this. Garden camera this afternoon." Grant frowned and pressed play. The footage showed Aaliyah holding Clara upright, patting her gently on the back while the baby coughed and sputtered. Clara soon calmed, Aaliyah smiling and tucking the blanket around her, until Genevieve appeared and tore the child away. Grant's jaw tightened. "She was helping her," he muttered. "Yes, sir," James said. Then he hesitated. "And there's more. One of the staff told me Mrs. Lancaster has been spending time with Mr. Ashford. I don't know if it's true, but—" Grant's face hardened, a storm brewing behind his eyes. An hour later, Grant knocked on the small apartment above the carriage house. Aaliyah opened the door, wary. "I came to apologize," Grant said, holding out a small bottle of cough syrup. "For what happened earlier. I saw the footage. You were protecting Clara. My wife's accusations were unfounded." Aaliyah's expression was unreadable. "She's trying to get rid of me," she said softly, "because I know something she doesn't want you to know." Grant's gaze sharpened. "Is that so?" Aaliyah didn't answer, but the silence between them said enough. "I'd like you to stay," Grant said after a moment. "Clara needs you, and I need to know the truth." Aaliyah hesitated, then nodded faintly. "I'll think about it." As he left, Grant's mind was no longer on the argument in the garden. It was on the shadow of betrayal that had just crept into his home. Grant barely slept that night. The image of Aaliyah, dripping wet and shivering under the weight of Genevieve's accusations, kept replaying in his mind, alongside the butler's hesitant words about Sterling Ashford. By dawn, his decision was made. He needed answers, and not the ones his wife would give him. The estate was quiet in the early hours. Grant sat at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee as the first light of day filtered through the tall windows. He was still in his robe when James entered, carrying a small leather folder. "Sir," the butler said softly, "I've made discreet inquiries, as you asked, about Mr. Ashford and Mrs. Lancaster." Grant gestured for him to continue. James opened the folder and slid across a few photographs. Grant's jaw clenched. The pictures were grainy, but unmistakable. Genevieve and Sterling seated close together in a dimly lit lounge, her hand resting on his knee. Another, the two of them leaving a hotel side entrance well past midnight. Grant closed the folder slowly. "Thank you, James. Not a word of this to anyone, especially not Aaliyah." "I understand, sir," James replied. "But if I may, Miss Jackson is a good woman. What happened yesterday was wrong." Grant didn't respond immediately. He was thinking of Clara's wide, trusting eyes. The baby didn't understand the storm swirling around her, but she felt it. Children always did. By mid-morning, Grant found himself walking the path toward the carriage house apartment. He knocked, and after a moment, Aaliyah opened the door. She looked better than last night. Dry clothes, hair loosely tied back, but there was still a guarded wariness in her eyes. "Mr. Lancaster," she said, her tone formal. "I know you probably don't want to see me," he began, "but I need to talk." Aaliyah stepped aside, allowing him in. The apartment was modest: a small sofa, a neat kitchenette, and a few framed photos on the shelf, one of a smiling teenage boy. Grant noticed her glance toward the picture before she turned back to him. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," he continued, "that Genevieve is trying to get rid of you because of something you know." Aaliyah's expression tightened. "I didn't want to get involved, but now, after what she did yesterday, I think you deserve to know." She took a breath, steadying herself. "2 nights ago, I was coming through the side hall to get Clara's bottle. I heard voices, laughing, and then I saw her, Genevieve, with Mr. Ashford. They didn't see me at first. She was in a slip, and he had his hands on her. I left before they noticed, but she caught sight of me just before I turned the corner. I knew then she'd find a way to push me out." Grant's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Sterling Ashford has been my friend for 20 years, he said quietly. "I trusted him like a brother." "I'm sorry," Aaliyah said, and he believed she meant it. He forced a measured breath. "I don't want you to leave. In fact, I need you here, closer to Clara than ever. But for that to work, you'll have to be careful. Genevieve can't know that I'm aware of anything." "Not yet." Aaliyah hesitated. "That means I'd have to see her every day, work under her glare, knowing she's looking for any excuse to ruin me. I'll protect you, Grant said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. And when the time comes, she won't be able to touch you. Something in his voice, calm but edged with steel, made Aaliyah believe him. All right, she said finally. For Clara. Later that day, the house was alive with its usual rhythm. The clatter of the kitchen staff, the hum of the air conditioning in the east wing, the muffled chatter of gardeners outside. Aaliyah returned to her duties, moving quietly through the nursery. Clara was awake, lying in her crib with wide, curious eyes. Aaliyah smiled softly, lifting her into her arms. From the doorway, Genevieve watched, her lips curved into a saccharine smile. Well, still here, I see, she said, stepping into the room. I suppose my husband believes in second chances. I don't. Aaliyah kept her tone even. I'm here to do my job, Mrs. Lancaster. That's all. Genevieve tilted her head, eyes narrowing. We'll see about that. One mistake, and you're gone. The tension was thick, but Aaliyah said nothing. She focused on Clara, humming softly until the baby's eyelids grew heavy. Genevieve lingered a moment longer, as if hoping for a slip, before finally sweeping out of the room. That evening, Grant hosted a small dinner in the formal dining room, just the family and Sterling Ashford. Aaliyah, serving discreetly alongside James, kept her head down but her ears open. Sterling laughed easily, as if the last few nights hadn't happened, as if he hadn't been caught on camera with another man's wife. Genevieve, resplendent in emerald silk, touched his arm lightly when she spoke to him, her eyes bright with something Grant could now see for what it was. He watched them both carefully, speaking little, his mind working. He wasn't ready to confront them, not yet, but every moment, every glance, was evidence. And when the moment came, he intended to destroy them both. After the guests left, Aaliyah passed Grant in the hall. He gave the barest nod, just enough to let her know he'd seen what she saw, that they were on the same side now. In her small apartment later, Aaliyah sat with a mug of tea, the day's events replaying in her mind. She thought of the boy in the photograph, the son she had lost years ago to illness, and of Clara's tiny hand gripping her finger earlier that day. For the first time since taking this job, she felt something like purpose. Down in his study, Grant poured himself a drink, but didn't touch it. Instead, he opened the leather folder James had given him and stared at the photographs inside. Betrayal burned in his chest, but he kept his face calm. This was a game now, and he intended to win. Somewhere upstairs, Genevieve laughed, light and careless, as she spoke on the phone. Grant recognized the tone. She thought she was untouchable. She was wrong. The next morning dawned with a sky the color of brass, heavy with the promise of a storm. Aaliyah woke early, nerves already tight. She had agreed to stay for Clara's sake, but every hour under Genevieve's roof felt like walking a narrow bridge over fire. She dressed in her plain uniform, pinned her hair back, and made her way to the nursery. Clara greeted her with a sleepy smile, and for a moment the tension faded. Aaliyah cradled the baby, whispering softly, "You're the only reason I'm still here." Downstairs, Grant was already in his study when James entered with a tray of coffee. "She's calling Mr. Ashford again," the butler said quietly. "It's becoming a habit." Grant's jaw tightened, but he only replied, "Good. Let her think I'm blind. The longer she believes that, the better." He took a slow sip, his mind running through the plan forming in pieces each day. He wasn't ready to confront Genevieve. He needed more, evidence that couldn't be explained away, proof that would end both her lies about Aaliyah and her sham of a marriage. Late that morning, Genevieve summoned Aaliyah to the East Terrace. The request came through another maid, her tone sharp and hurried, as if Genevieve's words had stung her too. Aaliyah carried Clara in her arms, the baby content. Genevieve was seated beneath the white pergola, a breakfast spread in front of her, untouched. Sterling Ashford sat across from her, leaning back with the ease of a man too comfortable in another man's home. His gaze flicked over Aaliyah, a small smirk tugging at his mouth. "Well, look who's still here," Genevieve said, her voice lilting but her eyes cold. "My husband insists on giving you another chance. I, however, am not so easily convinced." "I'm here to work, Mrs. Lancaster," Aaliyah replied evenly, setting Clara gently in the stroller. Genevieve's lips curved into a tight smile. "And I'm here to ensure you don't forget your place." She glanced toward Sterling, who chuckled quietly. "Isn't that right?" "Absolutely," Sterling said, his tone oily. "Some people don't know when they've overstayed their welcome." Aaliyah kept her expression neutral, but inside her anger simmered. Every word, every calculated look between them only confirmed the truth. They were working together, not just in their affair, but in their effort to push her out. A gust of wind rattled the glassware on the table, and Clara stirred in her stroller. Aaliyah instinctively bent to adjust the blanket, but Genevieve's voice cracked through the air. "Don't touch her unless I say so." Sterling laughed, the sound low and mocking. "Careful, Genevieve. She might be plotting to kidnap the baby." Genevieve smirked, as if the suggestion amused her. Aaliyah straightened, meeting Genevieve's gaze for a heartbeat too long. It was dangerous, but she wanted Genevieve to see that she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. That afternoon, Grant called Aaliyah to his study. She stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. "I saw what happened on the terrace," he said, his tone low. "She's baiting you. And Sterling, he's not just complicit, he's provoking you." "They want me gone," Aaliyah said simply, "and they'll keep pushing until I either quit or give them a reason to fire me." Grant leaned forward in his chair. "Then don't give them one. In fact, give them the opposite. Make yourself indispensable. If Clara cries for anyone, it should be you. If she eats, sleeps, and thrives under your care, I'll have even more reason to keep you here." Aaliyah hesitated. "That's dangerous. It'll make Genevieve hate me even more." "Let her," Grant said, his voice like steel. "The more reckless she becomes, the easier it will be to expose her." Rain began to patter against the tall windows, soft at first, then harder. The sound seemed to seal their quiet pact. That night, the storm deepened, wind rattling the shutters. Aaliyah was in the nursery, rocking Clara to sleep, when raised voices carried up from the foyer. She couldn't make out the words, but she recognized Grant's low, controlled tone and Genevieve's sharp, defensive replies. Then Sterling's voice joined the mix. Aaliyah moved closer to the door, straining to hear. "You shouldn't be here this late, Sterling," Grant was saying. "It's not appropriate." "Don't tell me what's appropriate in my own life," Genevieve shot back. "Sterling is a friend." "A friend doesn't spend the night in my house when I'm away," Grant countered, his voice taut. There was a pause, then the creak of footsteps on the stairs. Aaliyah quickly retreated to the rocking chair, pretending to be absorbed in soothing Clara, as Genevieve swept into the nursery, Sterling just behind her. "Is she asleep?" Genevieve asked curtly. "Almost," Aaliyah said softly, avoiding Sterling's gaze. "Good. Then you can go," Genevieve replied. "Sterling and I will watch her for a while." Aaliyah froze. She had never once seen Genevieve alone with Clara without summoning a servant for assistance. "I'm sure she'd sleep more soundly if—" "I said go," Genevieve interrupted sharply. Sterling leaned against the doorway, smiling faintly. "Don't worry, Aaliyah. We won't harm the precious little one." Something in his voice made Alia's stomach turn. She glanced toward Clara. Safe, for now. Then slowly left the room. Downstairs, Grant was waiting near the base of the stairs, his expression unreadable. "They sent you out?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Alia whispered. Grant's eyes darkened. "Stay close tomorrow. Don't let her keep you away from Clara for long. I'll handle the rest." As Alia returned to her apartment that night, the storm outside felt like a reflection of the one building inside the house. Genevieve was becoming bolder, Sterling more arrogant. Grant's quiet anger was sharpening into something dangerous, and Alia, caught in the middle, realized she was no longer just a bystander. She was part of the fight. Upstairs, in the nursery, Clara whimpered in her sleep. Alia wished she could be there, to be the one to comfort her, but she knew tomorrow would bring another chance, and another move in the silent, growing war between truth and deceit. Morning light spilled across the Lancaster estate, gilding the wet grass left by last night's storm. The air was thick and humid, carrying the faint scent of magnolias from the nearby grove. Alia arrived at the nursery early, hoping to see Clara before Genevieve could interfere. She opened the door quietly and was relieved to find the baby still sleeping peacefully in her crib. Alia moved to straighten the blanket, her touch gentle, but her thoughts restless. Last night had left her uneasy. Genevieve's insistence on removing her from the room, coupled with Sterling's mocking tone, gnawed at her. She knew they were testing boundaries, not just hers, but Grant's as well. Downstairs, Grant was already dressed for the day, speaking quietly with James in the foyer. When he saw Alia pass by, he motioned for her to join him in the study. Closing the door, he gestured toward a chair. "I'm going to be away for part of the afternoon," he said. "I need you to keep Clara with you as much as possible. Don't leave her with Genevieve unless I'm present." Alia frowned. "Do you think she'd—" She trailed off, unable to say the words aloud. "I think she's unpredictable when she's cornered," Grant replied, "and right now she knows I'm watching her." Alia nodded slowly. "I'll keep her close." By mid-morning, the household had fallen into its usual rhythm. Genevieve appeared in the breakfast room wearing a tailored cream suit, her hair swept up, her diamond earrings catching the light. Sterling arrived not long after, striding in without knocking, as if the house belonged to him. "We'll be in the conservatory," Genevieve announced to no one in particular, her eyes sliding over Alia as though she were invisible. Alia ignored the slight and carried Clara toward the sunroom, where the baby liked to nap in the warm light. She had just settled into the rocking chair when she heard faint voices drifting from the conservatory. Curiosity tugged at her. She edged closer, careful to keep Clara secure in her arms. "He suspects something." Sterling's voice was low, edged with irritation. "James is watching me like a hawk." "Grant's always been paranoid," Genevieve replied coolly, "but he has no proof. As long as we keep the focus on Alia, he won't look too closely at us." Alia's breath caught. She pressed her back against the wall, her heart thudding in her ears. "If she's smart, she'll leave on her own," Sterling continued. "But if she doesn't, we might have to give her a reason." Genevieve gave a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, I can think of a few." Alia retreated before they could see her, returning to the sunroom with her pulse still racing. She had suspected they were conspiring against her, but hearing it confirmed, hearing the malice in Genevieve's voice, sent a chill through her. That afternoon, Grant left for a business meeting in the city. Alia stayed close to the nursery, feeding and changing Clara, reading softly to her as rain began to patter again against the tall windows. The house was quieter than usual, the kind of silence that felt staged. She kept listening for footsteps, voices, anything. Around 3 o'clock, Genevieve appeared in the doorway, her expression painted into a smile. "You can take the rest of the afternoon off," she said sweetly. "I'll keep Clara with me." Aaliyah shook her head. "Mr. Lancaster asked me to stay with her until he returns." The smile faded, replaced by a flash of annoyance. "Aaliyah, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm her mother. You're just the help." "And I'm following instructions," Aaliyah said quietly. Genevieve's eyes narrowed. "Fine, but don't think this defiance will go unnoticed." She left without another word, her heels clicking sharply down the hall. The tension remained long after she was gone. When Grant returned just before dinner, Aaliyah met him in the hall and relayed what had happened. His jaw tightened. "She's growing desperate," he murmured. "That means she'll make mistakes. We just have to be ready to catch them." Dinner that night was a strained affair. Genevieve and Sterling sat across from Grant, their conversation overly casual, their laughter forced. Aaliyah served the meal with quiet efficiency, but she could feel Sterling's eyes on her, testing for a reaction. She gave him none. Afterward, as guests lingered in the parlor, James slipped into the study where Grant sat alone. "Sir," he said, lowering his voice. "The security team upgraded the system this morning as you requested. All cameras are now recording continuously, including the conservatory." Grant nodded slowly, a shadow of satisfaction crossing his face. "Good. Leave it running. We won't move until we have everything we need." Upstairs, Aaliyah rocked Clara to sleep, her mind replaying the voices she'd overheard earlier. The storm inside the house was nearing its breaking point, and she knew that when it came, there would be no turning back. In another part of the estate, Genevieve and Sterling were laughing in the conservatory, glasses clinking, oblivious to the silent watcher in the walls, the camera capturing every glance, every whispered word. The next day broke with a pale sun struggling through thin clouds, casting long shadows across the estate grounds. Aaliyah woke with a dull heaviness in her chest. The previous day's tension hadn't faded. She dressed quickly, determined to keep Clara within reach at all times. As she approached the nursery, she heard Genevieve's voice drifting through the slightly ajar door. "Darling, it's time to wake up," she cooed, her tone dripping with a false sweetness Aaliyah had learned to recognize. Pushing the door open, Aaliyah found Genevieve standing over the crib, a smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "I was just checking on her," Genevieve said, her voice edged with the faintest challenge. "You can take over." Aaliyah lifted Clara gently, noting the baby's sleepy sigh of comfort as she rested against her shoulder. Genevieve lingered, watching them with an expression that seemed to be measuring something. "You're very attached to her," she said casually. "It's almost as if you think she's yours." "She's not mine," Aaliyah replied evenly. "But she's my responsibility, and I take that seriously." Genevieve's smile hardened. "Be careful, Aaliyah. Responsibility can be misunderstood." Aaliyah said nothing, but the warning hung in the air long after Genevieve swept out of the room. Downstairs, Grant was reviewing documents in the study when James entered, his face set in quiet urgency. "Sir, the new camera feeds are live. I thought you might want to see last night's footage." He set a laptop on the desk and queued up a file. Grant leaned in, eyes narrowing as the images flickered across the screen. Genevieve and Sterling in the conservatory, their heads close, hands touching, voices muffled, but their intimacy unmistakable. It wasn't just the physical closeness. It was the tone, the kind that belonged to people who thought no one was watching. "Keep this secure," Grant said, his voice low, "and make copies." "Already done," James replied. "And there's something else you might want to hear, the audio from the hallway camera outside the nursery. He pressed play. Genevieve's voice came through, sharper now. "She's a problem, Sterling. As long as she's here, I can't breathe." Sterling chuckled darkly. "Then let's make sure she can't breathe. Metaphorically speaking. Push her until she quits. If that doesn't work, we'll find a way to make Grant think she's dangerous." Grant's hand tightened on the edge of the desk. He could feel the old rage rising in him, the kind he usually kept buried beneath layers of composure. "Leave it running," he said quietly. "They won't see it coming." Upstairs, Aaliyah was settling Clara for a nap when she noticed a folded note tucked under the baby's blanket. She frowned, pulling it free. The handwriting was unfamiliar, neat, deliberate. "You should leave while you can. She won't stop until you're gone." Aaliyah's first instinct was to think of Genevieve, but the tone didn't match her style. Genevieve would never warn her. She'd threaten outright. This felt like someone inside, someone who knew what was brewing. When Grant returned to the nursery later to check in, Aaliyah hesitated before showing him the note. He studied it, his brow furrowing. "This handwriting belongs to Beatrice, the head housekeeper. She's been here for decades. If she's warning you, it's because she's seen something." "Do you trust her?" Aaliyah asked. "With my life," Grant said without hesitation. "But if Genevieve suspects she's helping you, Beatrice could lose everything." That evening, Genevieve and Sterling left for a charity gala in the city. The moment the car pulled away, the atmosphere in the house seemed to exhale. Beatrice appeared at the nursery door, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Mr. Lancaster said you wanted to speak to me," she said in a hushed tone. Aaliyah nodded. "You left the note?" Beatrice glanced toward the hall before stepping inside. "Yes. I've been here long enough to know when danger's brewing. I've seen Mrs. Lancaster like this before, mean, calculating. But this time she's worse. She wants you gone because you know about her and Mr. Ashford, and she'll use Clara to do it if she has to." Aaliyah's stomach knotted. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you care for that baby in a way her own mother doesn't," Beatrice said simply. "And because I've seen too many good people destroyed by lies in this house." When Grant returned from his office later that night, Beatrice slipped into the study and quietly relayed what she'd told Aaliyah. Grant listened in silence, then thanked her and promised her protection. The trust in her eyes was the kind of trust he didn't take lightly. Near midnight, the rain began again, pattering softly against the tall windows. Aaliyah sat in her small apartment, Clara's baby monitor beside her, when a noise from the hall caught her attention. A door creaking open where no one should be at that hour. She moved quietly to the window and looked down toward the driveway. The headlights of a car were just disappearing into the mist. Genevieve and Sterling weren't supposed to be back until late. Yet here they were, leaving again. Something about it didn't sit right. She picked up the phone and called Grant. "They just left the house," she whispered. "At midnight?" His voice sharpened instantly. "Stay with Clara. Lock the door." In his study, Grant opened the live camera feeds, scrolling through angles until he found them. Genevieve and Sterling slipping into the garage, exchanging something, small papers, before driving off. He hit the record button and saved the clip. By the time they returned, the house was silent. But Grant was waiting, his expression calm but unreadable. Genevieve breezed past him with a practiced smile. "You're up late," she remarked lightly. "Just working," he replied. But inside, he knew the noose was tightening, and soon they'd hang themselves with their own rope. Upstairs, Aaliyah rocked Clara back to sleep, unaware that in the next few days, the fragile balance inside the Lancaster estate was going to shatter completely. The morning after Genevieve and Sterling's late-night excursion, the Lancaster estate felt different. The air was heavier, the staff quieter, as if they too sensed the tension running under the polished surface. Aaliyah rose early, still unsettled by what she'd seen the night before. She moved through her routine with deliberate calm, feeding Clara, changing her, humming softly. But her mind kept circling back to the garage, the exchange, and Grant's clipped voice over the phone. Downstairs, Grant was already in the study, his tie loosened, a coffee cooling beside a laptop. He had been reviewing the previous night's camera footage since dawn. There was no audio in the garage, but the images were clear. Genevieve taking a slim envelope from Sterling, her expression sharp, his posture tense. It was not the body language of two people at ease. It was the look of conspirators moving something they didn't want seen. James entered quietly, carrying a flash drive. "Sir, I pulled the full recording from all angles. You'll want to see this." He plugged it into the laptop and skipped ahead. From the conservatory feed, the conversation before their departure was partially audible. "Tonight's the last chance," Sterling's voice muttered. "We can't keep this in the house." Genevieve's reply was quieter but cold. "I know, and when it's gone, she'll have no reason to stay." Grant's jaw tightened. "She," he muttered under his breath. He didn't need to ask who they meant. Later that morning, while Genevieve was upstairs dressing for the day, Grant found Aaliyah in the nursery. Clara was on the floor, kicking happily at a soft toy, while Aaliyah kept a watchful eye. "We need to talk," Grant said. She glanced up, wary. "What happened?" "They're moving something out of the house, something important to whatever they're planning," he said. "And they made it clear you're the target. Whatever this is, it's the leverage they think they can use to push you out for good." Aaliyah swallowed. "Do you know what it is?" "Not yet. But we're going to find out." The plan began quietly. While Genevieve spent the late morning in the library with Sterling, Grant sent James to shadow them discreetly, keeping to service corridors and blind spots. Meanwhile, Aaliyah stayed close to Clara, but her senses were tuned for any unusual movement in the house. Around noon, Beatrice appeared in the nursery doorway, her voice low. "They've locked the small study next to the master bedroom. It's been empty for years, but now Mrs. Lancaster has the only key. James says Mr. Ashford was in there early this morning." Aaliyah frowned. "What's in it?" "No one's been allowed in for a long time," Beatrice replied. "But if they're using it now, it's not for anything good." When Grant returned shortly after, Aaliyah relayed the information. His eyes narrowed. "That study has an old safe built into the floor. If they're hiding something, it's in there." By mid-afternoon, Genevieve and Sterling left for a meeting downtown. Grant seized the opportunity. With James keeping an eye on the driveway for their return, he led Aaliyah to the locked study. Beatrice met them there with a small bundle of keys, none of which fit. Grant didn't waste time, producing a thin metal pick from his desk drawer. He worked the lock until it gave with a quiet click. The room smelled faintly of dust and something sharper, paper and ink, maybe perfume. The curtains were drawn, the air dim. Against one wall, under a worn rug, they found the safe. Grant knelt, working the dial with steady precision. When it opened, what lay inside made Aaliyah's breath catch. Stacks of photographs, envelopes stuffed with cash, and a small silver flash drive. Grant took the drive first, slipping it into his pocket. He thumbed through the photographs. Most were of Genevieve and Sterling in compromising situations, taken in various locations, but at the bottom was a single image that stopped him cold. Aaliyah in the nursery, holding Clara. It was recent, no more than a week old, and had been printed with a handwritten note along the margin. "Use this." Aaliyah stared at it, her stomach twisting. "They're going to make it look like I—" "Yes," Grant said, his voice low but firm. "They're building a case to frame you, Probably to say you're trying to take Clara, or that you're unfit to be near her. Beatrice looked stricken. They'll destroy her reputation. Grant gathered the items into a leather folder. Not if I destroy theirs first. They relocked the study and returned everything to its place, save for the flash drive and the incriminating photograph. Minutes later, James signaled from the hall. Genevieve and Sterling's car was pulling up. Aaliyah returned to the nursery, heart pounding, forcing herself into the rhythm of feeding Clara, as if nothing had happened. Genevieve entered a short while later, her smile practiced. "Everything all right here?" she asked, her gaze flicking over Aaliyah. "Perfectly fine," Aaliyah replied evenly. Genevieve lingered a moment, as though trying to read her, then left. That night, in the privacy of his study, Grant plugged the flash drive into his laptop. Aaliyah sat across from him, her hands clenched in her lap. The files inside were a revelation. Emails, scanned documents, even financial records tying Genevieve and Sterling to accounts in the Cayman Islands. The dates and amounts suggested not just an affair, but a long-term scheme to siphon funds from the family trust. "This is enough to end them both," Grant said, a hard edge in his voice. "But we need to be careful. If they sense we have this, they'll accelerate whatever they've planned for you." Aaliyah nodded, her resolve tightening. "So we wait and watch, and when they make their move, we'll be ready," Grant finished. Outside, the wind had begun to rise again, rattling the shutters. The house seemed to hold its breath, every creak and whisper charged with the knowledge that the war inside its walls was about to reach a point of no return. Upstairs, Genevieve slept soundly, unaware that the very tools she meant to use against Aaliyah were now in Grant's hands. And in that quiet, dangerous calm, the first threads of her undoing began to weave into place. The next morning, the estate buzzed with a strange mix of energy. Too many footsteps in the halls, too many hushed conversations cut short when Aaliyah entered a room. She could feel the tension pressing in on her from all sides, but she kept her face composed as she carried Clara down to the breakfast room. Grant was already there, sipping his coffee with deliberate slowness. He gave Aaliyah the faintest nod, an unspoken reminder to stay steady. Genevieve swept in moments later, dressed immaculately in a pale blue silk dress, Sterling trailing behind her with that smug air he always carried. "Good morning," Genevieve said with a brightness that felt sharp enough to cut. "I trust you slept well, Aaliyah?" "Yes, ma'am," Aaliyah replied, setting Clara into her high chair. She slept through the night. Genevieve moved to pour herself tea, but kept her gaze on Aaliyah. "That's good to hear. I'd hate for her to be disturbed." Sterling smirked, glancing at Genevieve as if sharing a private joke. Aaliyah kept her eyes on Clara, refusing to take the bait. Grant broke the silence. "Genevieve, I'll need you at the downtown office later today. We have some paperwork that requires your signature." Genevieve hesitated, clearly not expecting this. "Today? I have other plans." "This won't wait," Grant said firmly. "It's important." There was a flicker of irritation in her eyes, but she simply smiled and said, "Of course." After breakfast, when Genevieve and Sterling retreated to the library, Grant caught Aaliyah's arm gently. "While I have her downtown, James will watch Sterling. This is our chance to see if he moves anything else from that study." Aaliyah nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Stay with Clara. Keep things normal. If Genevieve or Sterling suspects anything, this falls apart." Midday came, and Genevieve left with Grant, her annoyance poorly hidden. James stationed himself discreetly near the east wing, eyes on the study door. Not long after, Sterling emerged from the library and headed upstairs. He glanced around before unlocking the study and slipping inside. James waited until he was certain Sterling was occupied, then moved swiftly down the hall to alert Beatrice, who had the master key to the upstairs linen closet directly opposite the study. From that vantage point, she could see enough to confirm what he was doing. Sterling emerged 10 minutes later carrying a slim briefcase, his face tense. He didn't notice Beatrice watching from the shadows. By the time Grant and Genevieve returned, Sterling was gone from the estate entirely, his car no longer in the driveway. Genevieve seemed distracted, glancing around as though expecting someone. Aaliyah stayed in the nursery, rocking Clara, listening to the muted sounds of their arrival. An hour later, James entered the nursery quietly. "He's taken something from the study," he said. Beatrice saw it. A briefcase, likely more evidence or money. Aaliyah frowned. "Do you think he's moving it out of the city?" "Possibly," James replied. "Grant will want to know." That evening, Grant called Aaliyah to his study. He stood near the desk, the flash drive from the safe still in his pocket. "Sterling's getting nervous," Grant said, "which means Genevieve is too. Whatever they had in that safe wasn't the only thing they're hiding." "We're running out of time," Aaliyah said. Grant nodded slowly. "I've set a meeting with my attorney tomorrow. If we can get this to him without them knowing, we can freeze their access to the accounts before they realize they're exposed." Just then, the study door opened without a knock. Genevieve stepped inside, her smile fixed, but her eyes sharp. "Discussing something important?" she asked lightly. "Business," Grant said without missing a beat. "The kind you wouldn't find interesting." Genevieve tilted her head, studying him. "Everything in this house interests me." Her gaze shifted to Aaliyah, lingering a moment too long before she turned and left without another word. The moment the door closed, Grant exhaled. "She knows something's shifted." "Then she'll come after me harder," Aaliyah said quietly. "Yes," Grant agreed. "But she'll make mistakes." That night, long after the household had gone still, Aaliyah sat in her small apartment, staring at the baby monitor. The green light blinked steadily, Clara's soft breathing a comfort, but every creak of the old house, every whisper of wind against the windows, kept her on edge. Near midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her door. Slow, deliberate. She stood, moving silently toward the door, her heart pounding. The footsteps stopped just outside. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a faint scrape, like paper sliding under the door. She waited until the steps receded before bending to pick it up. Another note, this one the handwriting hurried. "They'll act tomorrow. Protect the child." Aaliyah's blood ran cold. She tucked the note into her pocket and didn't sleep the rest of the night, her mind racing through possibilities. Morning would come soon enough, and with it, whatever move Genevieve and Sterling had been preparing for. And when it did, she knew the fragile truce inside the Lancaster estate would shatter completely. Dawn broke gray and heavy over the Lancaster estate, the kind of sky that pressed low on the horizon and made every sound seem sharper. Aaliyah hadn't slept. She kept Clara close all night, every creak in the old beams making her heart jump. The note in her pocket felt like a live ember, its warning echoing in her head. They'll act tomorrow. Protect the child. Tomorrow had arrived. Downstairs, Grant was already in the study, his suit jacket draped over the back of his chair. His eyes were tired but focused, scanning through camera footage from the night. He looked up as Aaliyah entered with Clara. "Any trouble last night?" "Footsteps outside my door," she said. "And this." She handed him the note. He read it once, his jaw tightening. Beatrice's handwriting. She must have overheard something. He stood, moving to the tall cabinet in the corner and retrieving a small lockbox. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a discreet, battery-powered camera. I want you to keep this in the nursery, he said. If anything happens while I'm not there, we'll have proof. Aaliyah took it, nodding. Do you think they'll really try something today? The note makes it likely, Grant replied, and if they do, we'll be ready. By mid-morning, the estate was unusually quiet. Genevieve appeared at breakfast but barely touched her food, her smile brittle. Sterling didn't show at all. The absence felt intentional, a silence designed to set Aaliyah on edge. After breakfast, Genevieve found her in the nursery. I'll take Clara for her walk today, she said, holding out her arms. Aaliyah didn't move. Mr. Lancaster asked me to stay with her. Genevieve's smile tightened. Aaliyah, I don't want to have to remind you of your position here. And I don't want to have to remind you that he's my employer, Aaliyah replied softly, steadying her voice. Genevieve's eyes flickered, the mask slipping for just a moment before she turned sharply and left. The hours crawled. Grant left for a meeting with his attorney, James, in tow. Aaliyah kept Clara close, feeding her lunch in the sunroom, while the rain began to patter against the glass roof. Around 2 o'clock, Sterling finally appeared, his manner unusually cordial. Mind if I keep you company? He asked, stepping inside. Aaliyah didn't answer, focusing instead on Clara, who was happily gumming a teething ring. Sterling strolled around the room, his hands in his pockets, eyes roving over the space. You know, he said casually, Genevieve's been worried about you. She thinks you're under too much stress to be caring for a child. Aaliyah kept her tone even. Clara's fine. For now, he said, his gaze sliding to the baby. But accidents happen, and if they do, you wouldn't want anyone to think you weren't capable. The implication was as clear as the smirk on his face. I should get back to the nursery, Aaliyah said, standing. Of course, Sterling replied, stepping aside but letting his shoulder brush hers as she passed. Back in the nursery, she placed the small camera Grant had given her in the corner near the bookshelf, angled toward the crib. She didn't have long to wait. Less than an hour later, Genevieve entered with a bright smile. Why don't you take a little break? I'll watch her for a bit. I'm fine, Aaliyah said. Really, I insist, Genevieve replied, moving closer. She reached for Clara, but Aaliyah stepped back. Not today. Genevieve's eyes hardened. You're making this difficult, Aaliyah. That's a mistake. She turned sharply and left, her heels striking the hardwood like small hammers. The rest of the afternoon was a tense blur. By the time Grant returned, the sky was darkening, and the rain had turned to a steady downpour. Anything? He asked as soon as he stepped into the nursery. Aaliyah shook her head. Not directly, but they've been circling, testing. Grant exhaled, his shoulders tight. Then it's coming soon. We'll be ready. That night, the house settled into its usual quiet, but Aaliyah's nerves stayed taut. Near midnight, Clara stirred in her crib, fussing. Aaliyah soothed her back to sleep, then noticed movement in the dim light, a shadow slipping across the nursery door. She froze, listening. The handle turned slightly, then stopped. After a long moment, the shadow moved away. Early the next morning, Grant was in the study when James brought in the camera from the nursery. They connected it to the laptop. The footage flickered to life. The timestamp matched what Aaliyah had felt. Someone approaching the door, pausing, then retreating. But the angle caught just enough of the face to make Grant's jaw lock. Genevieve. She hadn't knocked. She hadn't called out. She'd simply stood there, hand on the handle, waiting. Grant shut the laptop with a quiet finality. This is it, he said. Tomorrow, we end this. Aaliyah, standing in the doorway, felt the weight of his words. The storm they'd been waiting for was about to break, and when it did, Nothing in the estate would be the same again. The morning of reckoning dawned with a pale, deceptive calm. The rain had stopped in the night, leaving the ground soaked and glistening. The Lancaster estate looked serene from the outside, but inside, the air was taut, like a bowstring pulled to its limit. Grant moved through the house with quiet precision, making calls from his study and sending James on seemingly mundane errands that were anything but. Aaliyah kept Clara close, sensing that whatever was coming would happen today. She could feel it in the way Genevieve moved, too smooth, too composed, like a predator masking its anticipation. Around mid-morning, Genevieve appeared in the nursery doorway, her voice honeyed. "Aaliyah, I've decided to take Clara for a drive today. Just the two of us. I think we need some mother-daughter time." Aaliyah's grip on the baby tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. Mr. Lancaster asked me to keep her here." Genevieve stepped inside, her heels sinking slightly into the plush rug. "Aaliyah, you're beginning to sound like you think you make the rules here." "No," Aaliyah said evenly. "I just follow the ones that keep Clara safe." Genevieve's eyes flashed, the mask slipping for a second before she turned on her heel and walked out, her perfume lingering like a warning. 10 minutes later, Sterling appeared, leaning casually in the doorway. "Genevieve's upset. You should really make things easier on yourself. A little cooperation could go a long way." Aaliyah ignored him, focusing on Clara, who was babbling happily to her stuffed rabbit. Sterling's tone dropped. "It would be a shame if something happened to your employment here, or your reputation." He let the words hang in the air before walking away. By noon, the tension had reached a fever pitch. Grant came to the nursery, closing the door behind him. "It's going to happen this afternoon," he said quietly. "I've spoken to my attorney, and the police are on standby, but we need them to show their hand first." Aaliyah's heart thudded. "How?" "Genevieve's planning to stage an incident with Clara, something to make it look like you endangered her. The camera will catch everything, and the moment it does, we move." The hours crawled. Aaliyah kept Clara in sight at all times, playing with her on the nursery floor, feeding her lunch, and reading her stories. Outside, the sun had begun its slow descent when Genevieve returned, this time without pretense. She strode into the nursery, Sterling right behind her. "I'll be taking her now," Genevieve said, reaching for Clara. Aaliyah shifted, placing herself between them. "You're not taking her anywhere." "You think you can stop me?" Genevieve snapped. Sterling stepped forward, his hand brushing his jacket pocket in a way that made Aaliyah's stomach tighten. "Step aside, Aaliyah," he said, "or you'll regret it." Aaliyah didn't move. "Mr. Lancaster will be here any second," she said. "Do you really want him to see this?" Genevieve's lips curled into a cold smile. "Oh, he'll see it. Exactly the way I want him to." She lunged forward, grabbing for Clara. Aaliyah twisted away, and the baby began to cry at the sudden commotion. Genevieve's voice rose in a shrill accusation. "She's hurting her! She's trying to take my baby!" Sterling moved quickly, pretending to pull Aaliyah off, but his grip on her was painfully real. In the corner, unnoticed by them, the small camera's red light blinked steadily. The door burst open, and Grant strode in, James on his heels. "Enough!" Grant's voice cut through the chaos. Genevieve froze, still clutching Clara, while Sterling released Aaliyah's arm. "What is this?" Grant demanded. She was trying to take Clara!" Genevieve sputtered, her performance almost convincing if not for the calm fury in Grant's eyes. "Really?" Grant said, moving towards the bookshelf. He reached for the small camera, pulling it free and holding it up. "Because this will tell me exactly what happened." Genevieve's face paled. "Grant, save it," he said sharply. "James, take this to the study, now." Sterling stepped forward. "You can't just—" "I can," Grant said, his tone like steel. "And I will." James left with the camera, and Grant turned back to Genevieve. "I've tolerated your games long enough. You and Sterling have been lying to me, stealing from me, and now you've tried to frame an innocent woman. It ends today." Genevieve's composure cracked, anger and fear warring on her face. "You have no proof." "I have more than proof," Grant said. "I have everything I need to make sure neither of you ever set foot on this property again." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "And if you think the police won't be interested in your offshore accounts, think again." Sterling's smirk faltered for the first time. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Grant said. At that moment, James returned, placing a laptop on the dresser. He pressed play, and the footage rolled. The room was silent except for the tinny sound of their own voices. Genevieve's false accusations, Sterling's forceful grip, Aaliyah's calm refusals. It was damning. When the clip ended, Grant looked at them both. "Pack your things. You have 1 hour." Genevieve's mouth opened, then closed again. No words coming. Sterling muttered something under his breath, but even he knew the fight was over. As they left, Grant turned to Aaliyah. "It's over for now, but they won't give up easily. We'll need to stay ready." Aaliyah held Clara close, the baby's small hand clutching her blouse. "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly. Grant nodded. "Good. Neither am I." Outside, the sky darkened again, as if the storm that had been brewing for weeks still had more to give.